I'm going to walk through the Acer Nitro V ANV167272ZY the way I would if I was sitting at a desk, trying to decide whether this laptop actually lives up to the hype, or ends up being another box of parts that looks great on paper, but falls short in everyday use. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you're eyeing a gaming laptop, the biggest hesitation is usually about spending a solid chunk of cash on something that might feel great in a store demo, but then turn out to be a compromise you didn't anticipate. Maybe it overheats during long raids, or the storage fills up faster than you can clean it, or the screen's refresh rate doesn't translate into smoother gameplay the way you imagined. What I'm trying to give you here is a grounded look at what you'll actually experience once the box is opened, how the price lines up with the real value you get, and who should walk away with this machine, and who would be better off looking elsewhere. First off, let's talk about the day-to-day setup. You pull the Nitro out of its box, and the first thing you notice is the 16-inch WUXGA IPS panel running at 180 Hz. That combination is a sweet spot for most gamers who sit at a desk rather than a couch. The resolution 1920x1200 gives a bit more vertical space than a standard 1080p screen, which is handy if you like to have Discord or a web browser open while you're in a match. The 180 Hz refresh rate actually shows its benefit when you're playing fast-paced shooters or battle royals. The mouse feels lighter, and you can spot enemies a fraction of a second earlier. In my own tests with titles like *Valorant* and *Fortnite*, the motion was smooth enough that I didn't feel the need to crank the graphics settings to max just to mask any stutter. The graphics card, an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 5070, places this laptop squarely in the play most current games at high settings in 1080p category. It handles ray tracing, but you'll notice that turning on full-blown DLSS with ray tracing enabled still keeps frame rates comfortably above 60 frames per second in most titles. That's exactly where the Nitro shines. You can push the visuals a notch without sacrificing playability, which is a practical strength for gamers who want that extra polish without buying a desktop. However, if you were hoping to crank the settings for 1440p or 4K gaming, you'll run into the usual laptop ceiling. Expect to dial back textures or shadows to keep things fluid. So the practical takeaway is, this machine is built for solid 1080p performance with a little headroom for visual flair, not for high-resolution domination. Now onto the processor. The Intel Core i7-1240H, the 240H designation in the spec sheet, is a 12-core beast with a mix of performance and efficiency cores. For gaming, that means you get the raw horsepower needed for CPU-heavy titles like Cyberpunk 2077 or Assassin's Creed Valhalla while still having enough breathing room for background tasks, say, streaming on Twitch, or keeping a voice chat open. In practical terms, I could launch a game, start a recording session, and keep a web browser tab open without noticeable hiccups. That said, the 16 GB of high-speed RAM, while adequate for most current games, can start to feel tight if you're running multiple demanding applications simultaneously, like a video editor, a game, and a music production suite. You won't hit a wall, but you'll see the system start swapping to the SSD more often, which brings us to storage. The 512 GB solid-state drive is fast, and it boots Windows in seconds. The downside is simply capacity. Modern AAA titles can each eat up 80,100 GB, and with a few of those installed alongside the OS and your everyday apps, you'll be looking at a full drive relatively quickly. If you're the kind of gamer who keeps a rotating library of games installed, you'll probably want an external SSD or invest in a secondary internal drive later. The fact that the laptop offers a spare M.2 slot is a practical plus. It means you can upgrade without opening a whole new system, but that's an extra expense you have to factor into the total cost. Connectivity is another area where the Nitro tries to stand out. Wi-Fi 6E support gives you lower latency and higher throughput if you have a compatible router, which translates to a smoother online experience, especially in fast reaction games. The HDMI 2.1 port lets you push the 180Hz signal to an external monitor, so you can dock the laptop for a desktop-style setup and still keep that high refresh rate advantage. The USB-C port is versatile enough for display output or fast data transfer, and it supports power delivery, meaning you could theoretically charge the laptop while connected to a dock, although in practice the charging speed through USB-C is slower than the dedicated brick. These options make the Nitro a decent candidate for a hybrid setup: work on the go, plug into a monitor at home, and keep your peripherals tidy. Let's be honest about the aspects that can trip you.